This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation. Hold on. You mean to tell me you haven't saved March 24th for the Maryland Association of Christian Schools Administrators Retreat at Restoration Farm in Harford County, Maryland? For only $30, you get 2 great meals, Q&A with veteran leaders, some hilarious hosts, and just time spent in fellowship with those who know what you're going through. And if you're a Max member, it's free. Come on, email us at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com and register now. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zockel.
We got a lot to talk about today.
A lot going on today, so let's go ahead and get there right away.
Yeah, especially up front, because we're not going to jump right into our topic right away. We're going to talk about some things that's going on with the podcast. And then we'll use the second part to talk about the content that we have. The second part will be another bit of response from someone who wanted to hear us. Before that, though, I do need to tell you, Finn is here today. Hey,
it's
Finn.
I got Finn with us, so if you hear the extraneous noises, it's because
it's not our stomachs.
It's not the stomach. It's Finn. So we will see, and hopefully his stomach actually it works with us too. And he has so far. He's a great fourth kid.
So far.
The older, the younger kids, they usually are easier to work with. I've definitely found that to be true now. So
yeah, there he is, grumpy.
So here we go. So first up, I do want to note, we are just so blessed to be working with the Herzog Foundation.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth is the director of communications over there, and she has been great to work with. And there's a lot of changes coming to the podcast. Again, not in content, not in what you can expect from us, but hopefully just what improvements you can expect. And we want to be doing we want to be presenting a stronger professional opportunity for your professional development through this podcast, for our building of community through this podcast and everything, and they're going to help us do that. So we are really excited about that. Please bear with us, and even things like starting up our YouTube channel.
Whoa, getting the YouTube rolling.
Yeah, so we've had a YouTube channel in the past, but it was basically a repository for all of our unedited features, and now we're going to try to do a little bit better job editing these live feeds.
Yep.
Even starting with this one. So.
Getting in there, trying to change it up, make it a little easier for you guys to absorb the content coming your way from the Christian Principles Podcast. Mm-hmm. Speaking of things coming your way.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got the Max Administrators Retreat coming up.
The Maryland Association of Christian Schools Administrators Retreat. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years now.
And you've heard the ads over and over and over again. Yeah. But we've got updates. We've got exciting news about that.
We're going to tell you right now some of who our guests are. I'll start with Mr. Jameson Coppola. He is the AACS, the American Association of Christian Schools Government
representative.
I can't remember his title off the top of my head. My tongue right now, but I was just writing this down on
a lobbyist.
On the timeline. He is. He is the Christian education lobbyist that we have the closest access to, and we're excited to have him come. He'll spend about an hour that day just talking to us about the legislative updates, what's going on the Hill. The last time he did this, I remember he spoke for a long time, and he held my attention for a long time.
He's a great guy. He's a lot of fun to talk to. We hope to get him on the podcast sometime.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I definitely want to do that. But we got Brad Parker coming up as well.
Brad Parker from North Carolina, Matthews Christian, North Carolina. He's been on the podcast twice now as a guest on the podcast, but he also was a former executive director of the Maryland Association of Christian Schools. Mm-hmm. He's coming up to have a conversation, to be on a panel with us. I'm excited to hear from Mr. David Hobbs, who will be joining us as well. Mr. Hobbs has 40-plus years as a Christian educator and administrator in New Jersey and in Maryland. He'll be a new voice for a lot of the people in the audience that day. So we are excited to have Mr. Hobbs and his experience coming with us. Yeah. And last but not least, our good friend, the B to the W, Mr. Brian Wilson's going to be there too. He is the president, executive director of Max, and he tries to, eschew himself and to be self-deprecating, but we're excited to have him there.
I don't know how we haven't just started referring to him as B-Dubs.
B-Dubs.
I think that might be a thing now.
Does he look like a buffalo wing? Chicken wing?
Looks like he would enjoy it. We look forward to it, Brian. And we've got a lot of things planned already. We've updated our theme for the retreat already.
teamwork makes the dream work.
Boom.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but at the same time, we're going to wrap everything around making our teams at home stronger. And we're going to try to evidence that by, the feel for this retreat is not workshops. It's not you sit down and get yelled at. You sit down and get talked to. You sit down and just, you're the bucket I'm pouring into. That's not what we're doing. It is round table, panel discussions. You're going to be, we're going to have some team scenarios to work through. I'm really excited about that.
The other thing I would say is you're not getting yelled at, but we're also not putting it all on you.
No.
To present and keep the ball rolling. So we're going to work together.
It's going to be enjoyable.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm excited about it. And the food's usually really good, too. Brian's crew does a good job of catering that well.
It is good food.
All right, so there's a lot going on. We're thankful for you because you give us the community we are trying to build, and you give us reason to keep going. So let's keep going.
Yeah. All right. We need to take a time now to hear from our brand partners, and right after that, we'll jump into the content for this episode.
Let's hear them.
The Christian Principles Podcast is excited to share that we've joined the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network, a hub dedicated to advancing K-12 education and the Christian values we all share. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze and accelerate the development of quality Christ-centered K-12 education nationwide, helping families and culture flourish. One of their most impactful resources for Christian school leaders like us is the Herzog Foundation Institute. This program offers fully funded training events and retreats, enabling us to sharpen our skills without adding cost to our schools. Led by national experts, these events cover essential topics like marketing, donor development, and culture building, all tailored to the unique needs of Christian schools. Held monthly in Kansas City and other locations across the country, these events equip schools and their leaders with the tools and strategies they need to thrive. Don't miss the opportunity to explore all the Herzog Foundation has to offer. Together, we can strengthen Christ-centered education. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. That's herzogfoundation.com. Is your Christian school looking for part-time HR support from a like-minded agency? Zockel HR Consulting provides tailored solutions to meet your unique needs. Recruit, onboard, and retain top talent with their professional assistance. Visit www.zhrconsulting.com to set up a free consultation. Zockel HR Consulting, helpful HR for Christian schools. All right, we are back and we're ready to jump in today's topic, which is, I'm so excited. It's another response to not just what we do, what we've been saying, but even when our listeners are talking about the content with other people, they're getting responses as well and sharing that with us. And so we have a response to the changing dynamics in schools.
I'm excited to hear from another fellow educator who has listened and who has commented. And this came through a consistent listener who was passing this along to a friend and getting a response, or at least the content onto a friend and getting a response. So we are happy to hear the community grow, and we want to keep making that happen.
And we've talked about changing dynamics in a couple different ways so far, and more specifically when we've met and talked with Shannon Juris about just our students changing after COVID, and we've got other ones that we're going to be talking about in the future. But I'm going to read the response, and then we can discuss it as we go through. But this teacher says it looks like the whole landscape of education has evolved without anyone saying much. I've probably said it to you before, but I never really understood why priests and nuns didn't marry until I was a couple years into teaching and realized how I shouldn't really have kids or be married if I wanted to do the job well.
Can we just park there for a second? When I first read that, I thought to myself, what am I reading right now? This is stretching my mind in a number of ways. What is going on?
It all makes sense. we need celibacy in order to really be good at what we do.
Only one focus, which I suppose you could say that would be the truth for any pursuit in life.
Yeah.
As long as we are being extremely if we are giving it our 100%
Well,
at every moment,
I will
okay.
say when I read that, one of the first things about in my mind was Paul's statement, I would that everybody else be like me, being an unmarried man, because he doesn't have that added responsibility.
Yeah.
Do we dare call it a chain? I don't know if we should necessarily do that,
yeah.
but he was free to move about. And, when he got to a church, if he needed to spend 2 days there, if he needed to spend 2 years there,
he could do it.
He could do it. And without having that family responsibility, you're able to completely concentrate your focus and your time and your attention. And I mean, here we are with little baby Finn.
Little Finn.
Like,
right here.
He hasn't distracted us.
So far,
at
so
all.
good. Yeah,
so far, so good. Maybe we got to knock on some wood.
Yeah, find that real fast.
But that we have those distractions. I guess you could say. Good distractions.
Blessed distractions. Blessed obstacles we get to overcome to pursue the mission that he's given us, personally and professionally.
Well, he continues to say society expects it to be this bleeding heart vocational experience every day, and therefore, of course, the teacher better be willing to die for the sake of compulsory education.
Man.
Whoa.
Again, just going from celibacy to martyrdom. I guess is maybe not martyrdom, but at least being willing, dying for the cause. So it's,
I mean that's the expectation. And again, that's where I go back to, the assumption is that we're off, golfing or doing whatever we want when we're in our downtime, and I'll come back and have another discussion about that in a little bit. But just to finish up what he said, in the meantime, over half the people that did feel a calling to become educators are found out there wasn't anyone to educate, get replaced with whatever can be found, but expectations remain the same as if it's some high quality profession. Okay. So they felt called into this, but aren't quite prepared to meet the challenges that were there.
Yeah.
But yet the expectation is still there.
From society, from the parents. And I don't believe he's talking necessarily about paying parents. No. Excuse me. There's no such thing as a free education, of course. Taxpayer-funded education is what we should say. I don't think he's talking, though, about private tuition parents. I think he's talking here, especially because who this came from and his realm, the realm of individuals he was associated with. He's probably talking about public school parents and students here. And so again, this is very, very interesting. So much to talk about.
Now, I will say this, because there was an interesting thing when I was finishing up my undergrad and I got into student teaching, and I was placed in a public school. It was the first time I ever had exposure to a public school. But one of the quick things that I was being kind of, I guess, taught from the faculty that I was surrounded by was teaching is a clock in, clock out job, which I'm too familiar with Christian education where it never ends. Ministry never ends. Yeah. So you just assume
a life of service. Yeah,
that's what it is. Day in, day out, doesn't matter. If I need to put up a bulletin board in the middle of the night, I'll do it, But and there was a statement said to me, they don't pay us enough to, give our whole life to this.
Yeah.
So you need to get what work done you need to get done while you're at school. And then he's smiling. Finn is smiling at me. I got to laugh.
Smiling boy.
But get that work done, and then you go home and you put up your feet, or you do what you need to do, or else you're going to burn out, which,
we talked about that too previously.
There is some truth to that. Yeah. And I will even say that I've encouraged my teachers to be very careful in that realm.
Of course. We talked about with Hope Coopery, who reviewed non-contract hours with her administrator and, wrote up a project or a master's action research project on that. Those discussions are there to be had, and it's appropriate, but it doesn't sound like their total worldview was quite the same as what you were expecting it to be.
Right. And so that all being said, now what our friend here is expressing is, if I dare take a second to focus on my family, I'm going to hear about it.
Sure.
In some way, shape, or form.
Or to even have that family.
Yeah. And I think about this even as our pastor has said that I can't remember if it was a Sunday afternoon or something. He was mowing his grass. And no, the first Finn punch to
Finn
the mic.
attacked the microphone. That was amazing.
I think he was mowing his grass Sunday afternoon, and somebody driving by stopped and started yelling at him because he's like, "You're a pastor. You shouldn't be working on a Sunday." He's like, "My grass needs to be mowed."
Doesn't my ox not be pulled from the ditch? What must I do?
I don't understand. but it's just like I mean I get it, and I understand the perhaps. What am I trying to say here? The conflict of interest, maybe.
Sure.
Where you should be out ministering, you should be out visiting hospitals, you should be able to, yes, but at the same time, I have responsibilities.
Other things
and
to do.
If you want to come cut my grass, then I could go do those.
Then
things.
that responsibility goes away.
Right, and that's the same thing for the expectations of schools. I will say I wanted to share this because. This may or may not actually tie in perfectly with this, but I remember having a parent conference.
Sure.
Now, this was as administrator, not as a teacher. But the question was brought up about, homework and a statement which I've heard so much, and I wonder if this is perhaps a reason for the changing dynamic of, our kids have so much homework, whatever was being said, but then the statement came out of when do they have time to be a kid?
Yeah, just let them be a kid.
They need to be a kid, and they don't have that time to do that. And I've heard that a lot from a lot of families. And
our kids are a little less kiddie nowadays,
right? But then my initial reaction to that, as it kind of always has been, I'm like, well, what part of being a kid involves not doing homework? Because homework is a part of being a kid. This is the way I thought. I grew up when I was a kid. I did homework. So what's the difference? Yeah. But at the same time, it was then there was that conversation turned to like, what do you do when you go home?
Oh,
like, are you doing schoolwork from 4 p.m. to whatever?
Let me answer that question.
And I was a little taken aback. I was like, interesting. So you're saying that if I don't put in the same amount of work like we're masking your child, then I shouldn't ask that of them if I'm not putting that work in. And I said, well, let's pause and think for a second, because let me talk about what I do when I go home. So when I go home, I, as a father and husband, have responsibilities to do at home that maybe other people have opportunity to do at other times during the day. Maybe if they're stay-at-home parents, they can do that whenever they want. I have to do it after work, but there's a majority of Americans are going to have to do that after work. Yeah. Okay, so no different. I want to spend time with my kids as well, and you know what? Part of that time is doing their homework with them as well. So there is that. But let's set that aside, because that's what we're talking about is homework. But like, do I just go home and kick my feet up and I'm just like, this is life, I can relax for I have lesson prep. I have other things that I'm thinking through. That conversation I had with Johnny, and I'm like, how can I help him? And I'm thinking through that, and I'm working through that because I'm preparing for the next day. I'm, while I may not be sitting at the kitchen table every night, for an hour and a half, trying to figure out algebra or whatever else that they're frustrated with their child doing. It's like you're saying that what we're asking kids to do is unrealistic because we don't even ask that of ourselves. And I say, I don't think that's true. And ask any other teacher, because that's what this guy is saying is, I'm trying to support a family, also keep my class at the top of the game, which requires work. But now it's expected that I never take a second for myself or my family.
Sure.
In order to keep my classroom at its peak level.
Yeah, and to meet the demands that this gentleman may have been coming up against. Actually, I don't know if this is a lady or gentleman. I don't know. This is a we don't know.
It could be either way.
Either way. To meet the demands that this professional has come up against, depending on what the situation they're in, it very well may be a very difficult time in the history of teaching to be able to do that, with the demands on differentiation, with the demands that might be put upon him for his lesson planning or providing for a number of different plans in his classroom. I don't know. Like, it could very well be that this is probably one of the hardest times to be an educator.
Well,
and he can't do what yesteryear's educator. He can't expect what yesteryear's educator could have expected in his classroom concerning decorum, concerning respect and behavior or whatnot. And no one's saying that the golden years of the U.S. or the golden years of wherever were perfect. Now, not saying that, but we are saying that we have spoken with many of individual who has taught for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and they say, as is obvious from the amount of departure from the classroom, they say the students today are very different than the students of yesteryear behaviorally.
Right.
And the expectations of the parents are, for the most part, very different than they were in times past concerning respect, what they could expect of those parents in those classes.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. I'm speaking generalities, but those generalities exist, and they're not, and it's not a false statement. It is what it said.
I think there's also one kind of important topic to at least highlight, and that is perhaps the added pressure of social media, because right now you have teachers that are out there that feel this. I mean, I appreciate it, but they're being teachers, but they're also maintaining this persona of a social media influencer.
Sure, yeah.
So they're, uploading all their ideas, they're sharing stories of what they've seen in the classroom. And if our teachers, who are looking for ideas, get keyed into some of those, they start getting, again, disconnected from reality.
Yeah, maybe I'm not the best. I can't
because it's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm a terrible teacher. Or, my classroom is so boring because there's nothing on the walls. And, that's where we, again, just have to be a bit cautious that we're not holding unrealistic expectations for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know the reality of parents that are keying into that, where they're walking into the classroom and say, well, your classroom doesn't look like XYZ.
Sure, maybe that's a stretch,
on Instagram or whatever. But yeah, I think that more of their holding that expectation for themselves than to be outside. But that is another key, I think, another factor in changing that expectation. And I mean, I'll even say, just from the podcast perspective, it takes a lot to keep these things going. I can't imagine, trying to do this by myself as a full-time teacher.
Yeah.
And, trying to keep everything up with YouTube. I mean, we're dabbling in YouTube.
Yeah, we're trying.
And we're trying to get in there. But again, to balance a YouTube channel, because you want to talk about what you're doing at night. I wonder if a lot of those influencers have families or married, because I know what it takes to edit video and audio together and to make it, where it's accessible online. That's crazy. So yeah, I continue to go back to that thought, and I've had the thought too that Paul says, what would it be like if I didn't have a family?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Where would I? Absolutely. Going back to the way it was phrased, I understand. What do you say? I'm going to use his wording. I understand why they didn't marry.
Yeah, why nuns and priests didn't marry until he was until I was a couple years into teaching and realized how I shouldn't really have kids or be married if I wanted to do the job well.
And tongue in cheek, if I wanted to do the job well, it as is expected of me by the unthinking multitudes who've never done it before, never tried it before. Sure, I go back to where formal teacher education became a thing when in the prior to Middle Ages, but it became. Yeah, he's happy. This is crazy. He's not usually this happy like this. I bet people will like this video more than I like the other ones. Yeah. It's just my face.
We just need a picture of Finn smiling like that.
So in those times prior, when the first ideas of formal teacher education were coming about and being formulated and being executed, and the expectation for those teachers, and it was very much from a religious bent. It was from the it was from the church. It was people who came and gave their lives to the church, and then they studied in the universities, which were absolutely religiously driven. And then they would go and they studied for years, and then they would step in the classroom. They'd have mentor teachers and master teachers around them. It was expected to be a calling. It was expected to be something that they were continually working on. They did not have the demand that they be celibate necessarily, but it definitely was calling, and it was a
there was an expectation though that they be single. In a lot of, especially
Some of those
American,
trainings,
early
sure.
American, when the normal schools or the regular one school classrooms started going, dame schools they're referred to as, or even as having single men, because again they wanted that focused attention. Or even that you wouldn't be able to support them with financially if they had a family. So that was another driving point for that, but not an expectation that they're burning the candle.
In any case, though, students. That like it, I understand a bit about it being a calling, and I understand and maybe that's something to further have to make sure that our education program. I go back to this a lot, but if I was going to make my own, Zaco University, what would be some things I really wanted to focus on? And I think about the same with seminary students. I hope someone at some point stops the Bible majors or the pastoral majors and has a knockdown, drag out conversation with him of the worst and the dirtiest and the hardest, not dirtiest, but like the hardest things they're going to come across, and say, "Are you sure you want this?
Yeah.
Do you know this is where God is calling you in your life?" And the same thing with our educators.
Yeah.
And we don't want to scare more away than are already scared away. So maybe that's not what we want to do.
So we need to introduce, of course, Teachers Downtime 101.
So, or what you can actually expect in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the conversation we had with Shannon. And I said, would you value people that have been in classrooms post-COVID versus those that didn't in a different sort of way? And I, my mind was changed on that, listening, being a part of that conversation. My mind was changed to some extent, but I still see a great value in making sure that we understand and that we are causing those who are coming into the profession to be very aware of the true demands of it.
Yeah.
This is an interesting, the response of I need to leave all else and just be an educator. We have one of those. We have a couple of those right now that they're not yet encumbered with married relationships, but they are in relationships. I know you've talked about having to kick one out of the building every now and then. Like, would you go home? You need to go home now. It's time for you to get out of here.
Yeah, it's and I guess at the end of the day, the question of is that dynamic changing in the realm that the educational world in everything that's involved with, and the changing of the students and their needs, the expectations of what a teacher ought to be able to offer, as those things do change. How are we keeping up? And how are we supporting our teachers in that new assumed expectation?
Absolutely. And are you considering this walk to be possibly that demanding?
Yeah.
Are you considering? Because maybe we want to have some of that in it.
Yeah.
We want it to be a calling.
Yeah, definitely.
We definitely want it to be a calling.
Definitely want it to be a calling. Definitely want them to be in it. But at the same time, I would probably offer that those who are very verbal about the calling, like I feel called to be a teacher and I know this is what I want to do, those are the ones you've got to really keep an eye out for, because as soon as their expectations are exploded, then they're quickly like, oh, well, maybe I wasn't called because it's not what I was expecting. Like, I was expecting to get up and share this, I'm going to teach them this simple concept, and I've got a really creative way of sharing it with them, and you share it, and nobody got it. And it's like, maybe I'm not.
Teacher, wonderful job, yes. Round of applause for our teacher.
So yeah, we just need to make sure that we are helping our teachers who are feeling this way, because we know, and pretty much we can guarantee at some point in time in the school year, they're going to feel this way.
Yeah.
That they're burnout, or they're said the B word. They are or they're just overstretched, And, we need to remind them, hey, if you've got a family, make sure you're spending time with your family. Make sure you are focusing time on your family. The classroom will be there. We'll get there. It takes time. Or, if you need help with ideas, don't be the island on yourself.
Yeah.
Reach out.
Let's
help
there
each
are
other.
people around here to help you out.
All right. We got Finn's telling us it's
Finn's
time.
saying it's time to go.
It's time. We got to wrap it up.
He's got that 25-minute clock.
So we got to get to
25-minute clock pretty well.
Our spotlight, which today goes to Heather Furlong of West Fallowfield Christian School in Ackland, Pennsylvania.
So I'm driving back from Ephrata, Pennsylvania, where my brother-in-law lives, and I passed West Fallowfield. And I've passed this school lots on that drive back. But I decided this time to look them up for whatever reason, and then that led me to a couple of days worth of a conversation and a review and growing in an appreciation for and knowledge of who's out there. So West Fallowfield Christian School has been around for a while. It came around from a group of Christians in the community, not from any one church, but from several churches, I believe. And Ms. Furlong's been there, I think, for 20 years now or so. But they were through 8th grade, and now they're growing. They're putting a 9th through 12th grade together. And they are a part of the Mid-Atlantic Association of Christian Schools. Well, I hadn't, shame on me, but I wasn't aware of the Mid-Atlantic Association of Christian Schools, or Christian School Association, MAXA. So I got Googling, and I Googled, and I found Mr. Bill Stevens. Mr. Bill Stevens is the president, or president, maybe the executive director. I'm bad with titles. I got to write this stuff down. It's horrible. But Mr. Bill Stevens wound up having a conversation with me, and he's going to come on the podcast.
Oh, boy.
And talk about his role in MAXA and talk about, specifically going to talk about the value of face-to-face professional development. Which a great topic at a time when we have as many teachers ask if they can do something virtually as we want to go or wouldn't want to go, or still valuing the meeting together or face to face. And it's going to be an interesting. He sent a letter out to his constituency about that, so we're going to introduce him and hopefully have a repeat guest on in Mr. Bill Stevens. But Mrs. Furlong, we're thankful for what you do. We're going to pray for you right now, so let's go ahead and do so. I would take my hat off, but I'll go ahead.
I'll go ahead and pray, and we'll continue to uplift each other. So
yeah, go for it.
Father, we thank you so much for Heather and her contribution to Christian education and feeling the need to and feeling the calling, as we've talked about in this podcast, to lead students and faculty in a manner that brings you honor and glory. I pray that you would strengthen her, uplift her. I know there's challenging times, difficult decisions. I just pray that you would give guidance, peace, allow other administrators to come alongside of her and be a resource and a help. And Lord, most importantly, that she would find her strength in you. Just pray that she would have a blessed day today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thinking about you, Heather. Thank you so much for all you do.
Yeah, and that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for what you do in your part of Christian education. And I know times are changing, but God doesn't change.
Nope.
And our ability to wrap our arms around each other, that's still going to be there.
All right. Thanks for growing with us today. Say bye, Finn. Bye, everybody.
Before you go, we want you to know that we truly enjoy building this podcast and our community of Christian school administrators. To keep building on what we started, though, we really could use your help. Would you, right now, click follow on our Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcast page? Doing so not only sends the sultry sounds of the Christian Principles podcast straight to your account, but further helps us climb the ladder and reach even more Christian school administrators. Want to do more? Maybe bless us by sprinkling some extra goodness on our day? How about leaving us a shiny 5-star rating with a comment concerning what you like the most? As always, if you have further questions, comments, want to be a guest, know of someone who we should speak to, or just want to see more of what we're doing, you can find us on YouTube, X, Facebook, or contact us through email at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com. Thank you for partnering with us, and may God bless.